Welcome back to my Season 2 review of The Orville. This is part 3. Today we're looking at episodes 8 through to 11. I'm pleased to report that the season is finally turning a corner, with some solid sci-fi stories and less emphasis on relationship and romance stuff. The highlight of the season, without doubt, is the two-parter Identity. This story focuses on the enigmatic character of Isaac, a member of a race of artificial life forms called the Cullen. After he suddenly deactivates without warning, he appears for all the world to be dead. So the crew decides to journey to his homeworld, Cullen 1, in the hopes that he can be revived. This episode is an example of how the Orville can jettison the zany and wacky comedy and do straight-up serious sci-fi drama very well indeed. In fact, this is the most intense and action-packed episode of the show to date. There's a genuine mystery behind the Cullen that's quite intriguing, and yet they're also unusually creepy in a very Cybermen kind of way. Of course, they genuinely are terrifying, as they're basically mass-murdering automatons, as we find out in this episode. But anyway, Captain Mercer is eager to learn if the Cullens are interested in joining the Union, which would be a very big deal. Firstly, not much is known about the Cullen species, but more than that, they'd make a powerful ally against the Krill. The Cullens reactivate Isaac, who then tells them that he intends to remain on Cullen 1 and that he will not be returning to the Orville. The crew are understandably saddened at this news, especially Dr. Finn and her children. Isaac has become a kind of surrogate father to Dr. Finn's two boys. The coldness and apathy of Isaac is not something he can control. He simply doesn't understand human emotion, and his indifference to the crew is quite upsetting to them. However, all is not right with the Cullens. Heavy weapons are detected on the planet's surface, weapons that shouldn't be there. While on the planet's surface, Ty, Claire Finn's youngest child, discovers a cavern filled with the remains of billions of humanoids. It's revealed that the Cullens exterminated their biological creators in retaliation for once being enslaved, even after their creators had realized that the Cullen were a sentient species. Much to the shock of the Orville crew, Isaac has betrayed them. His actual mission aboard the ship was to determine whether biological life was worth preserving. This is a huge revelation. So I was thinking when I was watching this, maybe Isaac was playing along with his people's mission, or he was being manipulated somehow. But in truth, he wasn't. He genuinely had malicious intentions towards the crew. And that was a major character twist. The idea that this character has been a regular for a season and a half now, and we thought that we knew him, but because we never truly knew what the Cullen were all about until now, we were actually wrong to think that we ever truly understood Isaac and who he really was. The Orville is captured and the crew are held hostage in a dramatic conclusion to the episode. The ship is boarded by Cullens, who take over the Orville with relative ease, and then they plot a course for Earth with the intention of destroying it. They're accompanied by a fleet of Cullen vessels. It's a huge cliffhanger, and a dark and sinister ending that genuinely had me on the edge of my seat. The second part is good, though a little bit predictable in places. The crew have to attempt some kind of die-hard escape from the cargo bay where they're being kept. Kelly and Gordon escape the ship in a shuttlecraft and manage to enlist the help of a very reluctant Krill fleet. Young Ty and Yaphet crawl through the ship's vents to try to send a warning to the Union fleet, but when Ty is captured, Isaac is told by the Cullen leader to kill him. He refuses, and instead deactivates all of the Cullen on the Orville, including himself. It's the one moment where the real Isaac truly comes through. The Orville crew retakes the ship, and a massive space battle ensues. It's huge, and it goes on for quite a chunk of the episode. It's about as epic as any space battle in Deep Space Nine, but more frantic and much faster paced. The CGI is also fantastic, though I have to say, the Union ships really can't take much punishment against Cullen weaponry. The Orville is heavily damaged, but with the assistance of the Krill, Earth is saved and the Cullens retreat. The only aspect of the episode that's a bit hard to believe is Isaac's reinstatement by the Union. He gets some degree of closure with Claire Finn at the end, but it's not particularly believable that the crew could ever trust him in my view. Nevertheless, Isaac will never be able to return to his homeworld. Identity is the best Orville episode yet. It's not groundbreaking, and the story isn't exactly super original, but what it does very well indeed, with fun, action, and suspense throughout. Episode 10 is Blood of Patriots, which is a Gordon-centric episode. It's a strong character-driven story about loyalty and friendship. An old friend of Gordon's, a man named Orrin, is facing torture and death for destroying Krill vessels during a ceasefire. He takes refuge aboard the Orville after fleeing a Krill prison, but the Krill want him back or the peace talks can't proceed. Gordon's loyalty is tested here, when Oren wants to steal a shuttle and attack a Krill ship by using an explosive substance he's extracted from the blood of an alien woman posing as his daughter. Gordon ultimately leads Oren to think he's going along with it. The shuttle is destroyed and the peace agreement is signed. It's a classic divided loyalties story where the central character has to decide between his dedication and responsibility to his duty or his loyalty to his old friend, and Gordon Malloy is tortured by the decision he faces, but ultimately his commitment to the Union and Captain Mercer is more important to him. Oren is a product of war, and given the tragedy he's gone through with the loss of his family, he's unable to see the potential for future peace with the Krill. All he wants is revenge. Gordon understands that it's necessary to put aside past grievances and move forward, because there's a bigger opportunity for peace, which can finally end the bloodshed. But those who fought in the war will have the hardest time living in peace with the enemy. This story reminded me somewhat of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. There's an opportunity to broker peace between the Klingons and the Federation, but not everyone can put aside their past hatreds and move forward. It takes courage and forgiveness. Gordon Malloy is fast becoming my favorite character on the show. Scott Grimes is capable of doing the wacky comedy stuff, but also the sensitive and serious elements with a vulnerability and an endearing charm. He's very much an everyman who often has to rise to the occasion and overcome his fears and anxieties when the need calls for it. The next episode is also centered around his character. Lasting Impressions is another character-driven gem of a story. When the crew examines a time capsule from New York circa 2015, Gordon finds a smartphone among the items that once belonged to a young woman named Laura. He watches her videos on the phone and reads her messages and begins to learn about her life. He gradually develops an infatuation with her, so much so that he has the computer create a simulation of her entire life, extrapolated from the smartphone data. He gets to meet a holographic version of her and begins to develop a romantic relationship with her, though the crew are very much concerned because, obviously, a relationship with a holographic recreation of a woman who's been dead for hundreds of years can't exactly be healthy. However, things begin to go sideways when the holographic Laura decides to get back with her ex-boyfriend Greg, which was an event that was mentioned in her smartphone's text messages. Gordon decides to delete Greg, but in doing so, it changes Laura, making her no longer confident enough to sing in public, which was something that Greg inspired her to do. So Gordon restores Greg, knowing that he can't be with her anymore. He sings with her one last time on stage, and there's a very poignant moment right at the end where holographic Laura mentions the time capsule, and she asks for a photograph of her and Gordon to put on her phone when she places it in the time capsule. As Kelly Grayson mentions at the end of the episode, Laura stopped being Laura once Gordon began making changes to the program. At that point, she became like any other fictional holographic character. Lasting Impressions is a very clever and bittersweet romance story that functions almost like a quasi-time travel episode. You're aware that the romance is doomed from the beginning, and there's an inevitability about the pain Gordon is going to experience. The real Laura is long gone, but her legacy and her memory is going to live 500 years after her death. As much as he's going to miss her, as Kelly points out, most people are forgotten, but she managed to reach across 5 centuries and got a guy to fall in love. As she says, we should all be so rare. The Orville Season 2 has picked up a lot in these last 4 episodes, finally finding its feet as a proper space sci-fi action drama, with less emphasis on wacky comedy and silly jokes, and by taking itself more seriously, the show has developed a sense of purpose and a clear direction. No wonder it's been recently renewed for a 3rd season. Stay tuned for part 4.